Fake news. Bob Arum shoots down claims that Wilder revealed step aside amount. Man, when I first saw this story come out about Wilder, making a demand of $10 million, something told me this ain't real. I knew it was fake. When have you seen some of the ego of Deontay Wilder? Guy talking about rising like the phoenix from the ashes. Guy talking about his bomb squad nation's gonna come out, after getting beat the way he did in the rematch, is gonna come out and take step aside money. It didn't look within his character, and it seems to be a fake news story. And we need to find out who was making fake news stories, who was coming out lying that Wilder wanted $10 million, making up stories. Who's making up the stories? Let's get quickly to what Bob Arum said, because Bob Arum has taken this down. Bob Arum says directly the contrary. So Wilder, the Wilder people, when they saw these stories, made it known to us and MTK that Wilder was not amendable to step aside, that he wanted to fight Fury again and gain his revenge. Now that is what I believe Wilder would want, not to wanting to be stepping aside. So who's making up the nonsense? He also said, so these stories about step aside were fantasies. He also went on to say, I've been informed by the Wilder people that the original October date was acceptable and that we could make a fight as early as that date. So certainly November, December would be a no-brainer, Bob Arum said. So nonsense, fake news that Wilder doesn't want the smoke. Nonsense, fake wanted it offer demanded $10 million step aside money. Someone making up stories somewhere about this. Is there some folks in the media trying to, maybe there's some Tyson Fury fanboys in the media or something. I don't know what's going on there, because I knew when this story came out. If you check my two previous videos talking about Tyson Fury rejecting the offer and my initial video on Wilder, the apparent story that Wilder wanted $10 million, you can actually see how skeptical I am about this story. Wilder wanting, step aside money. When have you seen in anything that Wilder has, he's in terms of the things that he's been saying and his actions that suggest that he would want to accept step aside money? I alluded to the fact that if this story is true, it could have something to do with his bicep surgery that he did. Maybe he feels that maybe, even though it's quite far away in October, unless he feels for one reason or the other, he doesn't feel like he'll be ready or something. I don't know. That's the only reason, why I felt that maybe Wilder might, want step aside money and a guarantee at AJ or Fury, for the belts. But apart from that, I felt like, I don't know if this could be, if this is fake news or if this is real, because you can't just go from, triggering the trilogy straight away and saying all the right things in terms of wanting the trilogy, and all of a sudden saying, you know what, I'm gonna step aside. When has Wilder ever looked like spoken like somebody who wants to basically surrender? As David Hay says, Wilder is a proud man. Because David Hay, I think he came out and he said that Wilder's a proud man, that he wouldn't step aside. And I believe Wilder is a proud man. He's got that ego, the bronze bomber persona, you know, devastating right hand. For him to lose and then step aside, he'll feel like he's running away. That's how I feel Deontay Wilder would feel. He'll feel like he's cowering away, doesn't want the smoke. That's what I feel like Deontay Wilder would feel if he was to step aside. I don't know how stepping aside works in the psychology of Deontay Wilder. Someone who calls himself the Bronze Bomber, someone who calls himself a the most dangerous puncher in the history of heavyweight boxing. Someone like that who's basically, bigged himself up. He's been hyped up by the fans as the most devastating puncher history of heavyweight boxing. To come out and be talking about, I'm willing to step aside. Willing to step aside for what? He's been having his conflict with with Anthony Joshua. He's having his rivalry with Tyson Fury. Why in the hell would someone with the ego of Deontay Wilder want to allow them to do what they want to do? He wants to get his WBC back and go and challenge AJ. And also, $10 million. Bob Arum's actually said that there's no money to even be paying Deontay Wilder $10 million, and there's no money, and Kubrat Pulev's going to be demanding money as well on the other side. Who's going to pay Kubrat Pulev money? He's probably going to want something that maybe near to what Deontay is getting to step aside at his age. So this whole story about $10 million to step aside, I was skeptical of it at the beginning. Seems to be fake news. Who's coming up with the fake news? Maybe Deontay Wilder, when he was talking about he needs to get rid of some snakes in the grass. Maybe there's still some snakes in the grass bringing up fake stories out of his camp and feeding that to the media, or people making it up themselves. But Deontay Wilder, he's gonna be taking on Tyson Fury in the trilogy. Bob Arum obviously says these are fantasy stories about step aside. Who's making up the fantasy stories? Who knows? But obviously, Wilder's team, are still on the job for moving towards the trilogy. And also, when Bob Arum said that Wilder wanted to fight Fury again and gain revenge, that is the real Deontay Wilder. Gain revenge. That is the Wilder that I recognize, that the fans recognize. From what he was saying post-fight, talking about rising like the phoenix from the ashes, talking about his bomb squad nation, as I said before, talking about saying he'll rise again. How could you go from saying you'll rise again to talking about, oh, you know what? I said I'm going to rise again, but you know what? Can I have some step aside money, please? Fake news, nonsense. Drop your comments in the comment section below. What do you think about Bob Arum coming out, exposing this fake story about Deontay Wilder not wanting the smoke, about Deontay Wilder wanting step aside money? Seems to be a fake news story. Who came up with this fake news story? Maybe Deontay Wilder used to get rid of the more snakes in the grass. Drop your comments in the comment section below. What do you think about what I've said? What do you think about the potential trilogy between Deontay Wilder versus Tyson Fury? Can Deontay Wilder pick up the WBC belt again and redeem himself and set up a massive US versus UK undisputed fight against AJ? Who wins in the trilogy? Who wins potentially between Deontay Wilder and AJ if he gets there? Drop your comments in the comment section below. Let me hear from you guys. Cool.